All right. Thanks everyone for joining today webinar. We have a webinar on what's new with Aiven platform. My name is Amy Krishna Mohan, VP of Product Marketing at Aiven. Today I'm here with Jonah Kowall, our VP of Product Management, to share exciting news about our new release, all the work that we have done in the past 6 months. And you'll hear about new features and new product service that we rolled out. All right, so Jonah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate the introduction, and I'm excited to talk to everyone here today. Good morning for me. It's 9 a.m. here in South Florida. For those of you that are remote, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name's Jonah Kowall. I'm the VP of Product Management here at Aiven, running all of the product teams. I did want to remind you, please leave your questions in the question box or in the chat, and I'll kind of field them either way. I may address your questions during the presentation. I may address them at the end. I'm targeting about 45 minutes total, including the Q&A, maybe 50 minutes. The last thing that I also wanted to suggest is my Twitter is over on the left, and you can also send me questions there publicly or privately, and I'll answer. I'll make sure to get back to everyone either in the webinar or personally. I'll email you back answers to your questions. So with that, my background, just a little bit about me, is I came as a practitioner for many, many years running security, performance engineering, and operations teams. I've worked at various startups. I've been an analyst at Gartner for 4 years, covering mostly observability and monitoring of infrastructure and applications, application performance. And then I've been at several vendors, mostly in observability, relatively new here at Aiven, and wanted to tell you what we've been up to for the last 6 months. I joined about 7 months ago here. I will also be talking about open source today because Aiven is the open source data platform for everyone. I personally work on open source in my free time. I spend a lot of time on Jaeger, OpenSearch, and OpenTelemetry, which we'll be talking a bit about OpenSearch at least, not so much about the others. So with that, we're going to kind of go through the platform, some of the new services we've launched in the last 6 months. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Kafka ecosystem and Claw specifically. And then I'm going to dig into some of our newer services like Flink and ClickHouse. And finally, talk about some of our platform enhancements that we've made and some major releases that we've pushed out. And then we'll touch on the open source and the community. So that's kind of an overview of what you're going to hear about today. Thanks for joining. So I just wanted to start out, our services are up here on the top. So you can see we have streaming, storage, and analytics tools, generally speaking, and platforms that we provide. And we deploy those upon several different clouds. We have 4 primary clouds that we deploy on here at Aiven, although we run on 11 different clouds and over 160 regions across all of those clouds. We also have a really cool feature that you can see there, bring your own cloud. We're going to talk about that. That's an exciting advancement that we've been making, something that Aiven's had for a while, but a lot of new capabilities there. And then finally, the thing that Aiven provides that's unique is all of the tooling and integrations, compliance, operations, resiliency. And we provide a lot of ways for customers to interact with Aiven. Obviously, the console is usually how you start, but usually how you end is Terraform and a lot of infrastructure as code. So we see about half of our customers, if not more, using Terraform. We also have a Kubernetes operator, lots of ways to interact with the services and manage the way that you prefer. And then, of course, we provide all of the compliance, the identity management, the access control, around the services. And I did want to mention that, in the nature of open source, we provide an open source service. So We do not modify the upstream code. When we want to contribute something to a service, then we do that upstream and consume it. And we'll talk a little bit about that today too. So the platform itself is why you use Aiven, because you can always run your own open source. But what we do is we provide this at scale. We make it really easy to provision, to clone, to scale your services. And then we provide that 99.99% SLA and make it so that when you upgrade or when you scale or when you make changes, that your services stay up and running. This is assuming that you're using one of our services that is clustered. We also have non-clustered services for those that are running test or dev or maybe just trying to cut costs. Obviously, you'll take downtime when you scale if you do not have redundancy in the service itself. And then we provide observability. So that is either using Aiven tools, all based on open source. Prometheus is obviously really popular, and we provide the ability to scrape the metrics and the logs. And then we have integrations with Datadog that are super popular. So we run native agent and integration on the services. The reason customers come and trust us is because of our security and compliance, and we have lots of bells and whistles around that. As I said before, we do not modify the upstream open source, so there's no lock-in. When you run Kafka on your own, it's the same as Aiven. Anything that Aiven builds around Kafka, you can run it yourself as well, and we're going to talk a little bit about the ecosystem. And the same thing applies for Postgres, MySQL, Redis, ClickHouse, fill in the blank. What we do is just upstream open source and provide the management. Our pricing is really predictable. I was spending time with some customers last week, and everyone was echoing the fact that our pricing is consistent. What you see on the wizard is what you pay. This is very different from your cloud bills that can vary greatly. On Aiven, it's consistent pricing in general. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we're friendly with the tooling that you're using today, whether it's something like Terraform or using our API or CLI. That's really what we provide on our platform that is unique to Aiven. So let's take a look at this whole portfolio. We already kind of looked at it before, but we're going to actually drill into two specific areas that are new services in the last 6 months or so. One is Apache Flink, and we're going to talk about the stream processing capabilities that that brings to the table and how it complements Kafka. And then we'll also talk about ClickHouse, which is a great data warehousing and analytics data store. And those are kind of the two areas that we're going to dig into. We'll talk about some updates on a few others, and we're building some really cool stuff coming out over the next 6 months as well. So the innovation does not stop here at Aiven. So with that, I'm going to jump into our first poll. Let me just bring that up. I've got 5 polling questions today for you. And the first one is, which products are you using today? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So you can click one or more of these and just tell us what you're using. I'm expecting, and the reason why all of our services aren't here is because GoToWebinar only supports 5 options. So our most popular services, Kafka, OpenSearch, and Postgres, followed by Redis. And then if you're using other stuff that we provide too, definitely check that for me. And we'll see what the results look like. Okay, coming up to a minute here. I'm going to close the poll out and share the results with all of you. It's a little surprising. I'm not surprised to see Kafka out in front because it is so popular. I am surprised that Postgres is not up there because it is our second most popular service after Kafka. But it's great to see people interested in these. And now the next question that I have for you is question number 2, which is, what are you interested in learning about today? So I'm going to share this. I'm assuming a lot of people are going to click on Kafka but maybe people are interested in learning about OpenSearch and what that can do. We've gotten a lot of interest in Redis. People are dealing with scaling Redis, and there's definitely some challenges there that we hear from customers. We're actually working on something really cool for that type of solution. I'm not going to talk about that today, but definitely stay tuned over the next few months as we come out with that. So I'll give a couple more seconds for the votes to come in here, and then we're going to share it. Okay, I think we're pretty good. So not surprisingly, Kafka is still really popular. People want to learn about it, which is going to be our first topic. And then, as I said before, people are definitely interested in Redis. There's a lot of challenges with scaling it and managing it. So I'm glad that we're on the right path there to building a solution to handle those. So stay tuned for that one. So let's jump into some Kafka content. That's the #1 thing people want to hear about. So Claw is an Aiven sponsored project. We basically build this and manage it. It's Apache 2 licensed, completely open source. You can do anything you want with it. It is our governance console today. So the way that Claw works is that you essentially are able to have a private portal, manage users, control which users are assigned to which topics, and allow you to have really great governance over those topics, the schemas, the consumers and producers and connectors that are running. So this really gives you the whole ecosystem that you need to run a shared Kafka infrastructure. And so as your company goes from a small company to a medium to a large company, when you start to get multiple development teams working with Kafka, this type of governance tool is absolutely critical. So the way that it looks, you get this really nice dashboard and you can kind of manage and see all the requests and the users, and there's a nice user-based view for requesting topics and managing schemas and everything else involved in it. So it's a really nice tool. The downside of this today is that you have to run it on your own, and it can connect to any Kafka infrastructure and manage it. So whether that be an Aiven managed service, a competitor service, or your self-managed Kafka, you can use Claw with it. But you do have to run it on your own today. I'm happy to tell you that we are working on building this natively into the Aiven service. So Claw will soon be part of our console, and we will have the ability to do this natively in the service. It's definitely a request that we get a lot, is that people want this built into Aiven. So we are working on that. The way that Claw interfaces, as I mentioned, is that it's kind of the overarching layer on top of all of your Kafka components. The other open source project that Aiven sponsors, you can see on the top left, is Carapace. This is our schema registry. It's compatible with proprietary schema registries, but it works with everything. It's open source, Apache 2 license, so you can do whatever you want with it. The other pieces around Kafka here at Aiven is, of course, Kafka Connect for getting data in and out of Kafka, very popular service, and then Mirror Maker for replicating between clusters. And that can be an Aiven cluster or a non-Aiven cluster that we can replicate with Mirror Maker. And we're going to spend a little time on Apache Flink, which is basically the stream processing layer that we put on top of Kafka. And that's really powerful and can provide a lot of benefits and capabilities that you can't easily do with Kafka on its own. So it's really nice and complementary. So with that, let's jump into Flink. Flink is an Apache Software Foundation project. It has been around for quite some time. It's heavily used at a lot of different companies. There are countless names out there, from Uber to Alibaba to many banks that do fraud detection and other kinds of use cases with Flink. It provides the ability to do stream and batch processing, and there's a few different interfaces to it. So when we launched this version 1.0, we kind of had a few base features in the product, in the solution. So we targeted Apache Flink SQL, which is the ability to write SQL statements to essentially analyze, modify, and join data in real time inside the layer of Flink. And then, of course, the way that it works is you take data in and you send data out. You can have multiple data streams coming in, multiple data streams coming out. You can do manipulations and transformations with it. We also have native integrations with Aiven services and also external services, which are non-Aiven services. The other component of Flink that we don't support today is basically the custom code portion, where you can actually use an SDK and write Java code to do more sophisticated stream processing. This is something that we're working on supporting today, and then you'll be able to run your own code and your own jar inside Flink, and that will open us up for a lot of additional use cases. I mentioned fraud detection. That typically requires custom code, for example. We also have a lot of integrations with logging and metric endpoints. The reason why that's important is because a lot of the data flowing through Kafka is log data or metrics. And with Flink, you can actually take a log and switch it to a metric to either summarize data or aggregate data. So there's a lot of great use cases around observability that you can do with Flink. And it can really help cut down the volume of data and your bills generally when you're looking at observability data. So definitely worth investigating this, and it's an up and coming solution. So what does Aiven do that's unique with Flink? You can run your own Flink, but you don't necessarily get some of the cool stuff that we built into our console. We make it easy for you to define an application, which is a construct that includes a bunch of code that allows you to do this manipulation. So we make it easy to write the SQL statements right in our console. You can actually preview the data and the way it'll look. You can do versioning and releases and various other things that have to do with the workflow. So we built this into the console that makes it easy for you to do basic development of Flink SQL within Aiven. So these are the things that we bring to the table that are not part of the open source. They're part of our console, but definitely helpful when you're trying to experiment or build new things using Flink. So with that, I'm going to jump to ClickHouse, which is the other service that we launched in the last 6 months. ClickHouse is a data warehouse and analytics database created by Yandex. It is open source Apache 2 and part of our portfolio that sort of fills that data warehouse, data lake use case. ClickHouse, and we'll talk a bit about use cases and why people are so interested in ClickHouse. But it is basically a fully managed data warehouse. Obviously, we can run it on any cloud, and it deals with very high scale data ingestion and analytics use cases. It's a columnar database for those that are interested, and uses a SQL-like syntax. Basically looks like SQL and acts like SQL. It's a little bit different. And it's really designed for that very wide table view. So the thing about ClickHouse is that it's great with clickstream data, log data, anything that's highly non-normalized, call it that way. As soon as you start joining tables together, that's where ClickHouse can really start suffering from performance challenges. So if you're joining a small table with a big table, that's okay. But if you're trying to join two massive tables together, it can have performance implications. So it's much better suited for that wide data that is generally not normalized. And so it's really designed to deal with large amounts of ingestion. Think about clickstream and log and other types of analytics. You're talking about tens of gigabytes per second, so high throughput. And then also having very responsive query times. So being able to do aggregations and analytics much faster, and it really just helps speed things up considerably. When you compare this to common other cloud data warehouses, it tends to be very low cost in comparison and higher performance. And I'm going to be asking a couple polling questions about what you're all using for your analytics data stores there. But we've had customers come to us from BigQuery and Redshift and seen 10x or even more performance with significant cost savings compared to what those other tools are doing. So it can definitely be a great part of your tool chest there. And so, as I mentioned before, it's much faster performance. ClickHouse also has some really great integrations, so you can take data from your Postgres database or even from Kafka, feed it directly into ClickHouse, and then that gives you a really nice way of doing the analytics on that data versus having a huge Postgres database. I was just talking to a customer today that has a 27 terabyte Postgres database, probably not the most efficient use of Postgres, explaining to them that adding this into their tool chest and really reducing that Postgres database and turning this into the warehouse can be far more efficient, far more performant, and save a lot of money in the process. So the integrations and the way that ClickHouse works with other technologies is really the key part of it. It also has nice integrations with object storage. So you'll see us launching tiered storage for ClickHouse in the not too distant future. It's something that the open source already supports. And then, as I mentioned before, SQL-like syntax, so it's pretty easy to learn and to use, and it can aggregate data very quickly. So the use cases around this, as I said, it was really built as a clickstream analysis tool for doing real-time analytics, but it's great for logging. A lot of my friends at Uber implemented ClickHouse to replace their Elasticsearch log system and greatly reduced the footprint and made it highly efficient using ClickHouse. So it's great for these types of use cases and any kind of embedded analytics. If you're doing something in your product, we have a customer that does a lot of video analytics, and they use ClickHouse to really provide that analytics layer inside their product for their customers and internal use cases. And so it really helps with that high performance, give me answers quickly type of use cases specifically. So I'm going to pop up question number 3 here. I'm just sharing it, which is, what is your data warehousing strategy today? This is a multiple choice. Are you using a cloud provider data warehouse like BigQuery or Redshift? Are you using a third-party data warehouse like Snowflake? Or are you self-hosting something or other? And feel free to put it in the chat. Sorry, this was supposed to be multiple choice, but you can only pick one. So I guess pick the one you use the most. I can tell you here at Aiven, we use a mix of technologies. We have some of our data in Postgres. We use a lot of BigQuery, and we also use some ClickHouse. So for us, we use a lot of different tools internally. But BigQuery is probably the one that I would pick out of these because that's where we dump a lot of our data when it comes to cost data and cloud data. That's kind of our center here. So I'm going to close this poll out and we'll take a look at the results. Not surprised to see that the cloud providers are number 1. So yeah, that's definitely what we see as a major use case across our customers as well. I'd like to see what people are using in others, so definitely put it in the chat. I'm curious to see what other people are doing. There's a lot of really cool new projects coming out of the Apache Software Foundation in this area. So I hear from some of our customers that they're interested in or looking at some of the new data lakes and analytics technologies out there. So definitely keep an eye on that. So with that, let's move on to a little bit about OpenSearch and Postgres. There's a bunch of different enhancements. This is kind of a mix of things that we've introduced. For those that are not familiar with OpenSearch, OpenSearch is the open source version of Elasticsearch. So it's been in the market for a couple of years now. It was created by AWS, and several other companies got together to create OpenSearch and work on it. Aiven has several contributors working full time on OpenSearch, and we also have a maintainer on our team. So we work extensively in this ecosystem. OpenSearch has diverged and, let's say, done some things very differently than what you saw in Elasticsearch and the ELK stack. There's been a lot of scalability and functionality enhancements in the front end, which is called OpenSearch dashboards. It's basically Kibana, but it's sort of split and diverged at this point. It has a lot of really interesting data science components and plugins. There's also some really interesting security analytics that have started emerging, and it's starting to get pretty useful in terms of the capabilities there. And there's been some great work in observability. OpenSearch observability actually works with Jaeger as well, and it's very open source friendly when it comes to observability data. It can support multiple data sources, something that Kibana does not support. And there's a lot of really differentiated features in the solution. So the other thing to announce is the security plugin that's part of OpenSearch is now incorporated into the Aiven service. We have a public beta going on now. It's going to become generally available in the next week or so. So the security plugin really enhances integration with SSO systems and all kinds of other things that you can do with it. So definitely check out the security plugin. We've made it easy to configure in the console or through the Terraform or our API. So definitely check that out. We're on 2.7, so it's the newest version, at least for the next few weeks till 2.8 comes out. So Postgres 15, I was looking at these slides last weekend, and I actually saw a new news story about Postgres 16 beta 1 being available and some nice new features. But Postgres 15 is the latest and greatest. It came out in November, and we launched it in Aiven a few months ago. We usually leave a little bit of time for bug fixes and testing, and then we slowly scale it out across the fleet. Customers get to choose when they upgrade. We support a few major versions at any given time. Down on the bottom there, you'll notice that we support this until November 2027. So we generally have a 4-year cycle that we keep to with these releases. So you don't feel like you have to upgrade, but when you do want to upgrade, it's easy to do so. One of the capabilities in Aiven's platform is we can clone the service that you have. So you could take a Postgres 14 service, clone it, upgrade it to 15, test your application, and then just delete it. And you only pay for the hours that those two are running. So it's a really easy way to test and upgrade and do things methodically. And that's something that Aiven provides you. It's definitely a benefit to using our service that we can do that so easily. So the new stuff in Postgres 15, there's a new permission model and some interesting things that you can do with it. As you can see on the right, they've made some nice improvements on sorting, in-memory sorting, which can mean up to 10% or a little bit more performance improvement between 14 and 15. So definitely you'll see some performance gains just if you're dealing with any decent amount of data in your queries. There's also been a lot of performance improvements across clusters where queries will get federated and parallelized better. So that's nice. Due to the way that the connections work, the use of PG Bouncer is generally not really needed anymore. That's what we hear from most people. You can still run it. Aiven does provide fully managed PG Bouncer. So if you're comfortable with it and want to use it, that's fine, but it's absolutely not necessary based on what folks are saying about it. There's also compression improvements, so you'll see a little bit lower disk space on PG-15 versus some of the predecessors. So definitely a worthwhile upgrade, check it out. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the platform. This is our secret sauce here at Aiven, really what makes us different. So we're going to talk about some of the improvements we've made around reliability, resiliency, and cost optimization. So resiliency, customers are always asking for, how can I improve my DR? How can I improve my HA? So here are some answers for you. We have a new capability called backup to another region. It's supported on all of our services and allows you to actually back up your data, which stays in the cloud region that your service runs, to another region or even another cloud. So that allows you to take a second copy or even a third or a fourth copy and house those elsewhere. So today this is in beta just because we don't charge for it today. We are going to charge something for it. We're just working on the kind of the final pricing there. But this allows you to have that extra resiliency, that extra redundancy. Let's say one of the clouds disappears, you can bring your service up on the other cloud or the other region. We've seen some somewhat bad outages. There was a recent Google outage in Paris that affected a lot of our customers. Those that had this feature enabled, they could easily stand up their service in another region easily. So definitely gives you an extra set of resiliency. The other thing that we built is cross-cluster replication. For Cassandra, this is active-active. You can actually run 2 clusters in different regions or even in different clouds, and they replicate with one another, and you can read-write to both. On OpenSearch, one is read-write and one is read-only, but this allows you to, to replicate the data and at least have better scale in terms of reading, and obviously much better redundancy, because when there's an outage or an issue, you can just use the other cluster that's running there. Once again, this is in beta because of pricing, but we're sorting that out shortly. So feel free to use it for free. You do have to pay for both the clusters, but the feature itself doesn't cost anything today. So I did want to talk a little bit about bring your own cloud. This is a really popular capability that we have here at Aiven, and let me explain how this works. When you go to Aiven's website and you sign up for a service, it runs inside Aiven's cloud account. So when you want to run Postgres on AWS, that runs on Aiven's AWS account. We pay the bill to AWS, you pay the bill to Aiven. So you don't have to deal with the infrastructure, the billing, all of that stuff. That being said, many of you have big enterprise agreements with your cloud of choice, whether it be Microsoft, AWS, or GCP. And you may get better pricing than we do, or you have commitments that you want to meet. So what this allows you to do is to run Aiven inside your cloud account. So this makes the Aiven service cost a lot less. You're responsible for paying the cloud provider. The way that this works is that we basically set up a VPC tier, and we have a specific role that you give us within your account, and we are able to provision and manage those instances that are inside of your account that are specific to Aiven. Our control plane essentially connects into you through a proxy. That proxy is your single point of connectivity. So should you want to disconnect Aiven for whatever reason, you just turn off the proxy and no data will flow between. So it's just an extra layer of security that we put into place. And this is a really popular option and gives you the ability to use your cloud commitments and your discounting that you can get. and we run inside your account. So definitely reach out if you are interested in that. It's been very popular because of, once again, the cost savings that everyone's looking to get out of their cloud investments. The other thing that we built, which has been part of our command line for quite some time, is the ability to migrate MySQL, Postgres, and Redis. So now you can do that inside the console. So we built a nice wizard here that kind of guides you through how you migrate a database from either another provider or self-hosted onto Aiven. So it makes it super easy for testing and kind of looking at that. So check it out if you're interested in migrations. And with that, I'm going to pull up my polling question, which is, which platform innovations interest you the most? I'm just curious what you will pick. So this is supposed to be multiple choice. Yeah, so you can pick one or more. I think bring your own cloud's going to be up there, but I'm willing to be surprised. So cast your votes. Some of our large enterprises really like backup to another region. We have one customer that's running it across a couple hundred, I want to say 200 to 300 different services. So for them, that compliance and resiliency is really key. So we've seen that as popular. I'll give this a few more seconds for you to vote, and then I will share the results here. Okay, I think we've got all the votes in. I'm surprised when we did the webinar yesterday for APAC and the West Coast of the US, bring your own cloud was by far #1 people were interested in, but Migration Wizard is the winner here, which is interesting to see. So I guess maybe we should take a look at some other things that we can build into the console to make it easier for all of you. So thanks for sharing your interests on that one. And I'm just going to jump back to the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about open source and community. This is near and dear to my heart and super important to me. But first of all, in Aiven, we've launched a couple new things this year. One is our community forum. You can find it at the link down below. And we will also be sharing out the presentation and the recording with all of you, so the links will be active there. The community forum's a great place to ask questions, collaborate with other people, see what's going on in the community. We also launched the Developer Center, which you can see the URL down below. And this provides you with a lot of great tools, resources, and guides for using Aiven and using any open source. It's not really specific to Aiven. It's very generic. You can use it for all kinds of cool things. So definitely check those two out. And the other big thing that we launched was our free tier. So now you can actually use Aiven for free. We provide a small Postgres, MySQL, or Redis plan for free. Whether you're a paying customer or not, you can sign up and actually get these free instances. And the support is done through that community site. So if you have questions or you have concerns, definitely you can post anything on the community around the free tier. So take advantage of that. Great for home projects, for school, university, you name it. It's just another resource to have. All the same tooling works, the same Terraform, the same API. So definitely check that out. I'm sure you'll find uses for it. So jumping into kind of more open source, we have an open source program office. One of my colleagues runs that, and we have over 20 engineers that are dedicated to working on upstream open source. So we do this not only because Aiven wants open source to be innovative and we want features built into it that we would like in our products, but we also want viable ecosystems around open source. So some of the things that we've contributed to open source include a few of these projects here. We have PG Tracer, which is very popular for Postgres users. Guardian, which does backups. This is something Aiven uses internally to manage your Kafka clusters. We also have Claw, which we mentioned earlier, and we also contributed and manage the Prometheus exporter for OpenSearch. So these are just kind of examples, but it takes a team of people, and we have maintainers and major contributors to many of the projects here. We have several in the Kafka ecosystem, so just a few of my colleagues here. Those working on Flink and maintaining and working upstream in the Flink community. We have some great folks working on OpenSearch. As I said, some of the biggest contributors to the project are Aiven employees. And then finally, we've had long time involvement in the Postgres community. That's Aiven's first service and what the company actually started doing at the beginning. So some great folks working in our open source program office. And we innovate and build a lot of different things. So many of the technologies that you use today, if you're in Postgres, are either maintained or managed by people at Aiven. And the same thing goes across Kafka, OpenSearch, and Flink, just things that we've contributed to the ecosystem that we continue to manage and maintain. And it's super important to me, very important to the vision and the direction of the company. So we're getting near the end of the presentation. So as Amy is reminding us, please put any questions. We've got a few questions in the Q&A that I will get to in just a couple of minutes. And with that, I'm curious to see how important open source is to you. So I'm going to share a poll, and this one you can only pick one. Yes. Do you care that Aiven is a strong advocate for open source? Yes, it's important to me. Yes, it's important to my company. I care more about the price of the services, which is totally valid, or I just want to avoid vendor lock-in. So when I did this webinar last night, the third option, I care more about the price, was the #1 choice. Personally, I would probably pick the first one because I'm a big contributor and advocate for open source. But let's see what everyone thinks. Got a few votes still coming in here. All right, it's a little surprising, but maybe not so much. We also had a few people interested in the, or voting for the vendor lock-in one, which is definitely a big concern for companies. So the results of the polling, I guess the winner is, yes, it's important to me. That's what I would have voted for. But once again, the price is there. So open source is free, right? I mean, you can download it and run it. It's obviously not free to run it at scale. It takes people and energy, which is why people come to Aiven, is because they realize that we can do it more efficiently than they can. And you can really focus on building business value instead of running open source technologies, which is what we're really good at doing at scale here. So I did want to mention a few things here. So we've done a lot of work on the documentation side of things. I have a team of tech writers inside the product management organization, and we've done major reorganization and enhancements to our documentation. We also take contributions. Even if you see something that's a problem, you can always just open an issue and tell us what it is and we'll fix it, or you can open a PR and change it. We're actually going to be re-platforming onto a new documentation system in the next few months, so stay tuned for that. Lots of new content, as I mentioned earlier. Check out the changelog. It's when I talk to customers and point them there, they don't realize how much new stuff we're doing all the time. I like the RSS feed because it gives me an easy way to consume it all. But we have a product update page on Aiven that gives you all of the constant updates that we're doing across the services. So definitely check that out. So with that, I will jump into some Q&A. And if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. If you want a roadmap session, you're a customer, you're a prospect, please reach out to us. We're always happy to do those, dig in deeper to your problems or your questions, and get things answered for you. Stay tuned, because we're actually going to have a new external facing portal coming out soon, where you can submit ideas and vote on ideas. And we're just trying to open up the roadmap and the collaboration. So stay tuned for that. I've got about 4 or 5 minutes, and I've got 3 questions to answer here. So one of the first questions here is, we have some self-managed Kafka clusters. Can we directly process events with Aiven's Flink service, or would we need to replicate the clusters to Aiven first? So the answer is, you do not need to use our Flink service. You can use a self-managed Kafka and use our Flink service if you want. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of network IO and potentially latency when you do that, depending on where things are, but it's definitely a pattern that would work. So the second question here is, what would you say the biggest differentiator of ClickHouse is when compared to other data warehouse technologies? Why would I choose it? So the answer is either the performance in terms of queries, the cost in terms of being much more cost efficient. Those tend to be really the big differentiators. And then of course you own it. You can run your own ClickHouse, you can use another ClickHouse. You're not tied into a proprietary query language or data warehouse. So it gives you that freedom, lack of lock-in, lower cost, definitely a great option that a lot of folks are investigating. The last question is a Postgres question. The question is if we'll improve the service on Azure Cloud. So I'm not exactly sure what that means. We run the same service across all of the infrastructure out there. So AWS, GCP, Azure, DigitalOcean, and many others. We run it the same way. So when the performance is not necessarily as good, it's usually has to do with the cloud provider. There are also limitations on instances. So I was actually just doing some research yesterday, because on Azure, for example, in Paris, we can't get the newest versions of certain virtual machine types that we can get in other regions within Europe and around the world. So that limits us, because we can't use the latest and greatest hardware. And that's just a case that Microsoft hasn't deployed all the newest hardware in all the locations. So we are somewhat at the mercy of the cloud provider when it comes to what we run and what we choose and how we run things. That being said, if there are performance issues, we have support and good relationships with all of them that can really help us resolve those issues. So for you that asked that question about Postgres, please open a support case and fill us in on the details that you're having with Azure. I'm sure we can get it resolved for you.
Jonah, we have one.
I think that is all the questions. I'm just going to scroll through the.
We have a question from the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm just rewinding there. Give me a second here. So there's a question here about the VPC integration on Azure. I'm curious to know if it's possible to establish VNet peering between, this is a bit, oh, I see, okay. They want to interconnect between OCI and Microsoft. So we support a technology called Private Link, I believe. There's a Microsoft equivalent of this that allows you to basically define your own router and interconnect networking. So you can do that within Azure, and we support it on our side as well. That's probably the closest thing to being able to do like peering and private service connect types of things. But feel free to reach out, and we can provide additional details about that or help you with the networking questions that you have. We deal with a lot of those types of things just because every customer has such a different networking setup. So one final question also. Do do you have a CA certificate for Redis? So we provide either self-signed certificates that we get from Let's Encrypt, or we provide certificates that you can supply to us. So if you have a certificate that you want to use that you've gotten from a certificate authority, Aiven supports installing that on Redis. So you can sign up for your own certificate that maybe matches your domain name and deploy it on Aiven as well. So that's an option. This is in the documentation. Feel free to reach out to support and we'll get that answered for you. But we have a few different options when it comes to CAs and SSL. So I think I answered all the questions. But if I missed anything, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it back to Amy for some final housekeeping before we sign off. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining, everyone, and then thanks for the interactive session. We will share the recording and the slide to the email that you registered. So yeah, hope you have a great day. Thank you, Jonah, as well as everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.